Okay, let's talk about asking great questions in the interview process. And this section really gets me pumped up because I think that this is one of the most underrated skills that you can really perfect and hone in on during your interview process. It's really going to make you stand out amongst other candidates. Asking great questions, and when you ask great questions in the interview process, it really takes the interview from a very one-sided process from them, the interviewer, just asking you questions to more of a conversation. You get to learn a little bit more about them, about the company, about the role, get to go deeper instead of it just being a one sided interview. So, how do we do this? Really, when we think about asking great questions, there's a couple things to keep in mind. We want to be memorable, we want to stand out in the interviewer's eyes. So, we don't want to ask generic, plain old questions that anybody could ask. We really want to be curious and lean in to what we're hearing to learn more about it. The way we do that is we don't ask canned questions that just sound like any old person could find online. We want to ask questions that make the interviewer talk, get them engaged, get them into a conversation mode, not a just question response mode. The other really important thing to think about here is asking questions to the correct person. So there's two types of questions that you're probably going to ask that, generally speaking, that you're going to ask in the interview process. One type is a tactical job related question. The other is more of a strategic company related question. So a tactical job related question would be like something about, how do I do this job? What are you expecting me to do in my day-to-day role? How do people on the team today do this job? Those job related questions, you can ask those to a direct manager, the person that is going to be managing you, or you can ask it to another team member. Maybe you get a chance to interview with some of the existing team, you can ask them those questions. But you don't want to ask a tactical job related question to, an upper manager or a leader, from the C-suite, because they're not going to have much perspective on that. You want to ask the upper management, the C-suite, questions around long-term, bigger picture strategy, company related questions. So, where's the company going? Tell me more about, the competitive space. How are you selling this against the status quo? These larger, big picture questions that they're going to have a really good perspective on. So think about that. We're going to go into some examples here, but really just think about who are you asking your questions to, and is this that correct person that should be asking this question? Will they have a perspective on this, or maybe I should be asking somebody else that question? So before we look at examples, a really, really strong formula for asking a question is to start with showing the person that you've done some research or that you know some baseline fundamentals of what you're about to ask, and then ask a deeper level question. So, for example, you would never want to ask somebody the question, how many people work at this company? That's something that you could find out online. You could look on LinkedIn or Google, how many employees this company has. You would never want to ask that. But what you might ask is, hey, it looks like there's about 500 people working at the company today. I'm assuming that the company's been growing really fast from what I've read online. How many people do you think you'll be at next year? So now you're asking a deeper level question. You're asking more like a long-term kind of strategy growth question. Still not like an amazing question, but maybe you care, to know where the company's heading. So it's cool. But what I'm doing is I'm showing them I've done some research. I know some fundamentals, some baseline knowledge, and then I'm asking a deeper level question that we can get into a discussion about. So let's look at some examples, kind of like don't ask this type of example. So instead of asking something like, hey, does this company have growth or promotion opportunities? Of course, this company has growth and promotion opportunities. Every company does. But what you might want to ask if you want to understand what it's like to grow here is get the interviewer talking by asking them about their growth trajectory. So, hey, it looks like from on LinkedIn, I've seen you've risen up the ranks really quickly here. What did you do to be so successful? How can someone like me come in and, see a similar amount of success like you? Another question might be something like, what is the company culture like? Well, that's a really broad, kind of hard to answer question, but you could ask them, hey, it looks like you've been here for over 4 years. I'm sure that you could have worked anywhere that you wanted to. What are some of the things that you most enjoy about working for this company? So now, again, I'm showing them that I've done some research, I understand where they've come from, and now I want to get them to open up a little bit more about themselves. Another question would be like, how long have you been a manager? So again, you can find this online. You can look on LinkedIn and see that they've been a manager. So maybe I want to say, hey, I've seen you've been a manager for 2 years now. What's your favorite part about the role, and what's your least favorite part about the role? Like, this is a really interesting question that gets them to talk about their day to day. They probably never have gotten this question, and it's going to force them to think critically, and then you're going to stick out in their mind as someone who asks really good questions. So let's look at. I'm not going to read through all these, but we can look at some example areas that you can ask questions in, and you can always pause this video and write these down, or use these in your own interviews. So one thing I'll tell you is, think about, before you go into any interview, you should write down 5 or 6 questions that you want to get answered, and have those written down, on a notepad or on your computer, before you start interviewing with that interviewer. And every interview you go into, whether it's with the same company, you're gonna be talking with different people, or the same person, you want to have these fresh 5 new questions every time, so that when they ask you, hey, do you have any questions for me? You have something to answer with. The worst thing you could do is say, nope, no questions. It really just shows that you're not curious and not really caring about learning more about the opportunity. So what are some areas that you can ask questions in? One, you could ask about product. So you can ask about, how they differentiate from competitors, product features, what makes a product, or what makes customers love the product. You could talk about the industry. Like, hey, where's the industry heading? What was the status quo, before you all got here? You could talk about the sales process, objections they might hear from prospects. You might ask about, who they're going after, how they're targeting customers today. You could also ask about the company, right? You could ask about their growth projections. If it's a smaller startup, how much money they're raising, what they're using that money for. Where did this vision for the company come from? You could ask about the person, the interviewer you're talking to. Who are they? Why did they decide to join the company? What keeps them coming back? Staying at this company? How did they be so successful in their role? So here are just some examples that you can use. And notice that behind every question here, I've identified who this question might be targeted at. So this goes back to, again, you don't want to ask these, tactical job related questions to the CEO, because he or she's not going to have much perspective. But if you're talking with a team member that's doing the job today, then you really want to drill into the tactics with them. You don't really want to ask them these huge strategy questions about the company, because they're not going to have much perspective on that. So same thing goes with you when you're talking to like the CEO, or maybe you're talking to upper management. You want to ask these bigger strategy type questions that are going to elicit a really good response from those people.